We all seek that results of COP26 would materialize in concrete actions that address the MENA region as a climate hotspot. We aspire through our work, advocacy, and network from the US administration, the European Union and its member states, and the Russian Federation to consider climate security and water diplomacy as an integral part for their foreign policy in the Middle East. We are delighted to hear more on this topic today from our distinguished speakers from the US State Department, Slovenia, who currently hold the EU presidency, the Russian Federation, as well as other high-profile advisors and think tanks. Around this time of the year, last year, EcoPeace released a report calling for a Green-Blue Deal for the Middle East, a deal that addresses 4 main pillars to achieve climate security in the region. The release of the report received a lot of attention and has already been awarded the Council of Europe's prestigious Democracy Innovation Award. The deal suggests creating regional linkages and healthy interdependencies by the exchange of renewable energy and water. It also addresses taking proactive steps towards rehabilitating one of the most recognized water bodies in the world, the Jordan River, and the sustainable development around the entire watershed. The deal calls for a proactive approach on the issue of natural water allocations between Israelis and Palestinians, which is a matter left hostage to the long-due unresolved conflict, governed by the mindset of all or nothing. Today, the Green-Blue Deal suggests prioritizing discussions on water towards a final agreement that would secure Palestinian water rights, water to every Palestinian home at no expense to Israel's water security. All of the previous 3 pillars can only be achieved by extensive education, awareness raising, capacity building, and engaging with all sects of the society. Thanks to our main supporter, the Swedish government, over the years of our Good Water Neighbors program, we continue to witness the importance and quick returns of our educational program in creating a cohort of young leaders, skillful professionals, and creative individuals. During the past 4 years, only we have reached nearly 9,000 students directly and other 25,000 students indirectly through training more than 400 teachers on a comprehensive curriculum which EcoPeace developed. 135 young professionals and fresh graduates have been trained on principles of water diplomacy and another 45 trained on green social entrepreneurship. Those eventually will come out with joint regional projects that can be advanced as standalone programs or startup businesses. With the outbreak of COVID-19 in early 2020, EcoPeace accelerated and expanded the scope of its digital strategy, adding a variety of virtual and online educational activities based on serious gaming that would enable participants to freely explore the Jordan River, cross borders, and enter off-limit areas. The virtual world that we created with the help of young Palestinian, Israeli, and Jordanian architects and engineers brings value that can be used beyond the scope of the current crisis and offers access to the compelling vision of what our region could become. Today, our virtual world has become recognized as a useful educational tool by various prestigious institutions to their higher educational programs on water diplomacy, thanks to our partnership with IHE Delft and CAS for advancing this project forward. Over the past several years, we have formed a coherent network of highly qualified professionals in the field of water, energy and environment, media and policy advice, in which we call the Regional Leadership Forum, who discuss the most pressing environmental issues utilizing advanced simulation tools, a process which may lead further towards sound decision-making processes on a national level and would promote cross-border cooperation at a higher level. Our impact investment program has been growing by supporting several projects in various stages to see light, all led by local entrepreneurs. including closed system fish farming, high-protein grasshoppers breeding, solar-powered refrigeration for communal agricultural product, a palm fronds paper pulp factory, an ecological lodging park, and sustainable beehives for honey production. Yet, on a higher level, EcoPeace Middle East recognizes the significance of the recently announced renewable energy and desalination water exchange between Israel and Jordan as a first step towards regional climate mitigation and adaptation. It's a model for out-of-the-box thinking on climate security. The model that EcoPeace proposed for the water energy nexus aims at creating healthy interdependencies between Palestine, Jordan, and Israel. As we move forward in this endeavor, we look into further comprehensive and inclusive opportunities for all parties to which regional stability is advanced by meeting the self-interest and mutual gain of all. Through our environmental peace-building work, we remain committed to a fair and just peace in our region that supports preserving the viability of the two-state solution on 1967 borders. Peace that would correspond to the aspirations, prosperity, security, and dignity to all co-inhabitants across the banks of the River Jordan. Thanks to our donors and supporters, as due to their trust, generous funding, and encouragement, we have crossed our ordinary potential beyond borders and beyond limitations and beyond the definition of an ordinary NGO. Grateful to so many friends and partners who have made our journey super interesting and fulfilling. At the top of my head, the Cyprus Institute, the United States Institute for Peace, the Stimson Center, Brookings Institute, the Klingendale Institute, Waterkeepers Alliance, and the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, and many others. Thanks to journalists and media outlets regionally and internationally who have featured our work and helped spread our good word, including most recently the prestigious The Economist, the Time magazine, the New York Times, and namely Thomas Friedman. And last but not least, I would like to congratulate our team, every single individual in Ramallah, Tel Aviv, and Amman office, working day and night during the weekends and holidays at the expense and time of their families and private comfort. Thank you for your commitment, loyalty, and professionality. Thank you for your persistence and for being in the front line of our not easy, but super rewarding mission.
Sorry that I'm sitting in a car with quite bad lighting, and I'm not the deputy minister either, but I'm the ambassador to Israel from Sweden, and I used to be the ambassador to Jordan from Sweden, and have been working with EcoPeace for some years now. I'm very proud of working with EcoPeace. Maybe you should see the light or lack of light in the car as a result from Glasgow. We do have some light after Glasgow, but we have a lot of more work to do. In Swedish, I'm very proud of our partnership since many years with EcoPeace. As many two-state solution and Jerusalem as a capital in two countries. The road is long, but it is one of the tools and one of the ways of getting there could be EcoPeace and the idea of more of cooperation when it comes to climate and energy. I've always been inspired when I meet EcoPeace staff in Amman or be it Ramallah or be it Tel Aviv, because your never-ending energy for what you're doing is actually creating a little bit of better world. The Green Blue Deal, I remember first time I was sitting with Gideon. I don't know if it was in Amman or if it was in Tel Aviv, and Gideon was telling me that Green Blue Deal can actually be the new European Union or coal and steel that we had in Europe, making countries dependent on each other and in that way promoting peace. And even if we are not for the moment creating the European Union in the Middle East, it is a vision to strive for in the way that if you connect people, if you make people dependent on each other, in the European case of coal and steel, it is a way of promoting peace. You are meeting with other people, but you also know that you are dependent on each other. We all know that climate change is here, and climate change is for real. I'm coming from Sweden. I'm proud to represent a government that is trying to put climate change on top of the agenda. And we are actually trying to become fossil free. We're trying to show leadership in this, maybe the greatest challenge we have to humanity for the moment. But even if, when I come to Sweden, I'm also humbled that I know that the effects of climate change are going to be much tougher for poor people in poor countries than rich people in rich countries. Because at the same time as we're trying to do what we can to take down the carbon emissions, we also are preparing ourselves for the change that will come with climate change, because we have the means to do it. And if you compare what's going to happen with Sweden, what was going to happen with the Middle East, if you have a temperature rise in 4 or 5 degrees, it's going to be huge challenges for all of the countries of this region. That is probably one of the reasons for why more and more people in this region is also coming together and trying to do something to solve it together. With these words, I just want to thank you. I know that many people are online. I would especially like to thank you for the EcoPeace team, for your commitment, your inspiration. You have started to take the first step for promoting the idea of getting solar panel from Jordan into Israel and go that water the other direction and creating that kind of interdependence. And of course, maybe I'm naive, but we live in a region for the moment that has sun almost all the time. We're a little bit envy of that in Sweden, where we don't see the sun for the moment. The sun must be one of the key solutions to actually creating a renewable societies. And if we could work together in this region, I promise you that Sweden, and I know that many European countries and other countries say the same. We will be with you every step of the way in the work you have for creating a better future when it comes to combat climate change, and also the very, very hopefully positive side effects of getting people closer together and promoting the idea of peace. Thank you for letting me join, but more importantly, thank you for your commitment, for your inspiration. Being a Swedish ambassador, I'm proud of our cooperation with EcoPeace. Toda rabba, shukran.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric, Your Excellency. It was really inspiring and encouraging for us all to hear your words. I'll take this on towards our next session, which we are hosting two remarkable speakers, Mr. Alex Greensbowski, who's the Managing Director of Pacific Resolutions from Canada, and who's the author of an incredible book, who's going to introduce us more to his work, and Lucy Kurtzer, who's from the U.S. Institute for Peace, and who has a profile of working for several years on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Arab-Israeli conflict, and particularly with several publications on that matter. I'd like to start with Lucy on several aspects that you could touch on in terms of the on your focus on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and how you perceive that the idea of climate and environmental factors can contribute to peace-building efforts in the region. And what do you think the opportunities and impediments of such approaches can be in terms of social, political, and diplomatic context, particularly for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
Thank you, Nada, and congratulations, of course, to you and Jana and Gidon on another year of persistent and passionate and important and impactful work in this area. To your question, I think the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is perhaps the ultimate case study and prism through which to understand the challenging relationship between managing and mitigating environmental threats in the context of a conflict. So I know it's become a cliche to note that climate change and environmental and pathogenic shocks don't respect borders, but phrases do become well worn for a reason. They happen to be true. And Israel and the Palestinian territories they're in a getting hotter, water scarce region. Extreme climate events such as floods, sandstorms, droughts, you name it, other extreme weather conditions are only projected to become more persistent and more severe as the century progresses. So it's not a matter up for debate that Israelis and Palestinians rationally share an interest in doing what they can, of course, to prevent or mitigate the impact of these projections. They are two peoples who, despite decades of diplomatic, political, and I would say even psychological attempts to separate from each other, are living fully interconnected and in many ways interdependent lives. But I think, as those of us who study conflict know, reason often falls prey to principle in a conflict context. And we've seen that. And that framework, the lack of trust that's built up over many years, has prevented a lot of progress in these areas. And at the same time as drivers related to the practices of occupation and also internal political divides have exacerbated some of these threats. So I think there is a mutually destructive cycle at play, and the goal here is to turn it into a virtuous cycle, which I think is possible with this issue of environmental challenges. So just a little bit of history here that I think is relevant. If we look back to the early 90s with the signing of the Oslo Accords, the posture of the parties was much more inclined towards an optimistic and win-win outlook. And I think it's in that context that in the Oslo II interim agreement, we saw, that was in 1995, we saw several articles pertaining to joint environmental responsibilities, obligations, stewardship, joint commissions set up, resource allocations indicated, etc. But these mechanisms fell prey to some of the same conflict drivers that many other elements of the conflict have fallen prey to. So joint commissions fell apart, didn't meet for years. And of course, since Oslo was designed to be an interim effort, these measures were not designed to withstand or keep up with or be relevant to the dynamics that have unfolded in the almost 3 decades since then. So I think that given all the threats that we see, we'd like to think of environmental concerns as an urgent and easy impetus for getting the parties to cooperate with each other. But I think we do have to understand that when the parties are entrenched in conflict, the way Israelis and Palestinians are, they view everything, as you mentioned in your introduction, through a zero-sum lens of your gain is my loss. Even environmental imperatives and clear steps for improvement get viewed through that lens of suspicion. But I think there are some opportunities here to create that virtuous cycle that I mentioned. I said that reason often falls prey to principle, but there has arguably been a logic at work for conflict stakeholders who've prioritized addressing what they see as immediate-term existential threats of their political conflict over what were long seen as over the horizon and sort of intangible climate and environmental-driven threats. But I think what we're seeing now is a growing awareness and more daily experience of those threats as that over the horizon gets closer and the public and public health and humanitarian consequences are coming home to roost, frankly, for both parties. So with that urgency in mind and an understanding of the ways in which the conflict that is not about climate and resources, but ultimately impacts and is impacted by both, should provide incentive for both parties and room for third parties to help get the Israelis and Palestinians there, to address some of the structural and psychological impediments to urgently needed cooperation. This cooperation around a shared interest, with that being the first goal, can in turn breed more trust and confidence building that I think can lead to progress in other areas of the conflict. But I think if the parties, and we can talk a little bit more about this further in the discussion, but if the parties aren't ready to give a win to the other side, if they're not there yet, or address the conflict itself, the key is for them to understand that in doing what they can to unlock avenues for cooperation on the environment, they are in fact acting in their own self-interest, and a win-win is possible here. The last thing I'd say on this point is it doesn't have to mean, and of course it should not mean, environmental focus at the expense of or as a substitute for resolving core elements of the conflict. And I think this point needs to remain clear and be at the forefront of any steps that are taken and actions required in order to get both parties on board. And of course, this is particularly salient for the Palestinians at this point. But I think that the parties and international community need to keep in mind that meeting everyone's maximal interest in meeting the environmental challenges of today and tomorrow will ultimately require political solutions to the conflict. But there are things that parties can do now, and perhaps we can talk later if the political actors aren't there yet. There's a lot that can be done on the ground by civil society actors as well.
Absolutely. We will touch on this later in our conversation. Thank you, Lucy. And to you, Mr. Alexander, you've had a long experience in international mediation teams and negotiations. Your recent book specifically speaks about several issues, which also Lucy has touched upon in terms of confidence building measures, etc. And in your book, Mediating Peace with Climate Change, which was published in June 2021, you've mentioned several issues on imperatives, opportunities, impacts of climate change and conflict. Can you tell us more how this fits within the context of the Middle East peace?
Happy to, and likewise, I'd like to congratulate EcoPeace on your successes and hopefully motivate you to reach for more. And thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. As my fellow speaker Lucy has said, and the ambassador, we all know that climate change is a powerful and destabilizing force. It's disrupting the social systems and arrangements that we take for granted, whether they're good or bad, and it's multiplying the risks. And if you think of the metaphor of a glass of water, when you're thirsty, the question is, how thirsty do you have to be before you pick it up and drink it? And climate change and the imperative of climate change is making us all a lot thirstier. And I think Lucy was alluding to this, that it's the opportunity is it's bringing adversaries into a common problem context where it is necessary to pick up the glass of water and drink it because you can't think of anything else. And what EcoPeace has done is put the glass of water in front of everyone and brought uncommon partners together in a way that track one processes aren't able to do, and speaks to the role of civil society organizations in facilitating new arrangements, analogous to the coal for steel deal in the middle of last century that the ambassador was referring to. And if we think about the significance of the coal and steel deal for European peace and the building of the European Union, I think we are only limited by our imagination in terms of what's possible in the Middle East. And in this context, it takes organizations like EcoPeace to show people what's possible and then to actually make it manifest as real things, as real opportunities. And so I congratulate you on what you've been able to do so far, and say, as you know, it's not nearly enough. It's a great start, and it's real, as opposed to an imagination. So those are my opening remarks, and I look forward to further discussion with Lucy and with yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. This is really encouraging, and you've touched on the work of EcoPeace, and thank you for the encouragement. And this brings me again to Lucy to touch back on the issue that that also fits within EcoPeace as a civil society organization and its role in organizing and working with grassroots levels. In your testimony for the Netta Louie Fund for the Peace and Partnership for Peace Act, you've mentioned on the importance of diversification of action and inclusion of grassroots in the peace building process. In the context of the Middle East and specifically the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, how do you think environmental peace building can play a role within the grassroots level and civil society?
Yeah, thanks, Nada. I think it's an incredibly important and significant question. You know, I spent a lot of time in the first part of our remarks talking about how stuck things have been at the political level. And while I'm not naive enough to say this hasn't seeped down into the civil society level, there is a lot of anti-normalization and anti-engagement sentiment there. But we know from years of evaluation of peace building work, civil society, what's often been called people-to-people work in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that the more successful paths to people engagement, to civil society work to build peace on the ground, runs through activities that address shared functional needs and interests, more so than activities just designed around, say, dialogue and mutual understanding. And there are so many opportunities here in the environmental space. Alex has mentioned, of course, the wonderful work that EcoPeace has been doing in this space. And as you said, something that I think that I note is very important when focusing on civil society work in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict arena is a diverse approach, an inclusive approach. You're going to have the most success with peace building when you're engaging across as broad a section of the relevant populations as possible. And of course, a shared goal and imperative like the environment provides that opportunity. I'll use an example from your own work. I know your organization, EcoPeace, has done a lot of work around the Jordan River Valley. And that, of course, is an area that has great significance to religious populations, religious actors from the many different faiths represented there in Israeli and Palestinian society. So this kind of cooperation opens the door to engagement by broad constituencies on the ground in Israeli and Palestinian society. It has the ability to have strong, tangible effects when people are talking about taking shared stewardship and ownership over their own environment, their own water sources, their own shared water sources, preventing pollution that, of course, affects everybody. In this regard, there are some real opportunities here for meaningful work, and the investment that is now coming in from the United States, you mentioned the Nita Lowey Fund and other actors, really provides an opportunity to invest in the ability for the publics themselves not to just have to sit and feel like they are held hostage to whatever progress is made or not made at the political level, but to really take action into their own hands.
Mr. Alex, you've also touched on this in your book about the role of civil society, and maybe if you can give us some concrete examples also from your experience, given that you've also mentioned several experiences around the world, not only the EcoPeace experience, but also some experiences from other parts of the world. Can you give us some examples, and can you walk us through on some concrete lessons learned from civil society action around the world on climate and peace building?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Like in the Middle East, climate change is changing the way people's livelihoods can be pursued. So if you look at the Sahel region across Northern Africa, we see historic relationships between farmers and herders being disrupted, and the patterns of transhumance are changing as a result of the changing climate. This has caused conflicts in many different countries, and those conflicts have been exacerbated by extremism, by small arms trading, by many different factors. And it's the people's lives that are being disrupted that matter the most. And there's many organizations in the region that are endeavoring to find new ways for these conflicting parties to interact with each other to maintain a peaceful relationship. And those are CSOs and their international agencies who are helping them establish, conflict warning systems, so that there's a warning of the incoming transhumance herders, and planning systems to establish zones for grazing and farming, such that the herders know where they're going and the farmers know that their fields will be safe. It's similar to it's finding solutions that are similar to what the Green-Blue Deal has done in the Middle East. It kind of makes sense to take new technologies and use them to deliver on old human needs, the need for water, the need for energy, and in a region that is where both are disappearing quickly, and the need is going to increase. And I just want to shift to the importance of what we would describe in the sort of conventional peace building world as the role of unconventional actors. In this I mean civil society organizations and the private sector. Today, I think it's fair to say, in Glasgow and the ambassador's remarks remind us that we aren't and we cannot rely on governments to lead the way exclusively. We see civil society organizations and the private sectors stepping up to transform the relationships between people and the relationships that underpin the economy. And what does it take to take a risk with capital, to invest in something new, to position oneself in the new economy? Well, that's what we see the United Arab Emirates is doing in Jordan, investing in a massive solar generation facility that has the capacity to deliver energy to Israel and Palestine and get them off of diesel and actually provide emission-free energy to all communities. Mm-hmm. In the desalination plants actually have the capacity to create water surplus in a place where everyone has only known water scarcity. And so what I'm speaking to is the role of unconventional actors to become mainstream. Right. In fact, we can see in the Sahel region the same kinds of things emerging. We see it here in Canada, in a wealthy country, where a day doesn't go by where we don't see either civil society or the private sector announcing some new initiative that's bringing to bear technology that people couldn't imagine only a year ago. And those are the new status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. This is really useful because it brings me up to the final question to Lucy. Specifically that Alexander has mentioned the role of civil society and how it drives potentially the interest of governments to endeavor further into improving things on ground and taking larger leaps in terms of climate security. You've mentioned in one of your articles in June what the Biden administration actually expects from the Palestinian and Israeli, the Palestinians and Israelis in order to move forward on the conflict mitigation issues in the region. You've mentioned that the Biden administration would come with re-establishing positions previously considered fundamental as to a sustainable solution and not be consumed in conflict or sidetracked from what it seems more pressing priority. It does seem that at the moment there's a priority for the Biden administration, which is climate change, especially by the appointment of John Kerry as climate envoy. But also they have a particular track on the political agenda for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Do you think that there's a way that this administration can balance between both the political track that it wants to take for the region and between its climate interests as well?
Yeah, thanks, Nada. I mean, I think as mentioned earlier, I think many actors now, the United States certainly chief among them, but also Israelis and Palestinians realize that environment is not an over-the-horizon issue. It's a here and now issue. And so while you alluded to in your question that the administration may seem unlikely or reluctant at this point to take robust efforts to restart negotiations, for example, around the political conflict in which the Israelis and Palestinians remain engaged. There is space here with the focus on environment and all the factors that Alex has mentioned, discussed, that the technology that exists, the networks on the ground that do exist to make meaningful progress and come up with win-win solutions on the environmental file, there is potential there to be leveraged for the United States and other third-party actors to invest in order to create progress on these very urgent issues that have been deemed a priority by the US administration and others, and perhaps in the process, and maybe as a byproduct, but a very important byproduct of that, create momentum, build confidence and trust towards making progress on some of these more intractable political issues that exist. The fact, as you said, that the administration seems to have prioritized this issue by appointing a cabinet level envoy for the first time speaks to the urgency that our government and others are placing on this issue. And so I do think that this provides an opening to start, as I said, this what I keep calling a virtuous cycle that can lead to clear wins for both the parties on the ground and the region writ large, but also hopefully lead to some progress in those other urgent political matters that remain unresolved.
Thank you, Lucy. And quickly with back to you, Alex. How do you think the Green-Blue Deal relates to some of the conclusions and recommendations that you presented in your book, particularly to some of the high-level institutions such as the UN and the UN Security Council? Can you give us some concrete recommendations here?
Sorry, I just want to pick up first on Lucy's virtuous cycle, because I think she's absolutely right. That the just like conflict breeds conflict, progress breeds progress, success breeds success. And what the Green-Blue Deal does is demonstrate that what we said in our paper is actually potentially true. In fact, it is true. That by creating new relationships that are based on mutual gain and mutual risk reduction, the interdependencies are established that sustain and grow peace. And that's what the Green-Blue Deal does. And in our paper, we need the Green-Blue Deal times 1,000 in the world. And what you're doing here in the Middle East is demonstrating that in a place of supposed intractable conflict, you can create new relationships between old adversaries, just like happened in Europe. And I guess in the middle of the last century, it was pretty hard to imagine the Europe of today, but it exists. And so we need to apply the same imagination to the situation in the Middle East. And what that means for the world is, well, if you can do it in the Middle East, why can't we do it here? I mean, there aren't, the contest between adversaries is extreme in many, many places. And it's been extreme in the Middle East. And what you're demonstrating is that old adversaries can become new friends, and interdependent, mutually supportive relationships can emerge. And they have, and they will, and they must. And what the Green-Blue Deal does is show us a way in the context of climate change. And that's what our little book concluded. And we need the unconventional actors to work together with the conventional ones to make it real. Well, thank you for your work and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander Grybowski, Managing Director of Pacific Resolutions. Thank you, Lucy Kurtzer, who's the director of the Palestine-Israel Conflict Program in the US Institute for Peace. By this, I would like to turn it to the Jordanian director of EcoPeace Middle East, Yana Abu Talib, who's gonna walk us through the very interesting discussion with her guest speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nada. It has been a year since EcoPeace launched its Green Blue Deal for the Middle East. The report focused specifically on Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, which is the main area of EcoPeace's operation and influence. As such, the set of proposed solutions were context-specific, addressing the particular needs of our three countries facing climate change, and taking into consideration technical, economic, and geopolitical aspects that are relevant to the implementations of the four components in the report. And yet, climate change and its relationship to national and regional security is a global phenomenon. Hence, the applicability of the Green Blue Deal and its underlying rationale transcends the specifics that have been addressed in the report. During the process of advocating our set of solutions, we partnered and cooperated with reputable institutions that share similar interests and areas of expertise, and identified synergies that cross-cut issues in the process. If I were to frame what non-governmental organizations that work towards climate change resilience have in common, it would be the ability to identify climate change hotspots, recognizing the roles of science and technology in designing innovative solutions, and calling for a well-informed decision-making process that integrates climate change into policymaking and planning, and faith in the ability of civil society to influence global action through education and raising awareness. Two particular institutions that are noteworthy in this regard are the Stimson Center, which is the leading think tank that addresses urgent global issues. Its mission is to promote international security, shared prosperity, and justice through applied research and independent analysis, deep engagement, and policy innovation. The Stimson Center was ranked 10th among the US think tanks and is among the top 20 defense and national security think tanks globally. Stimson's MENA program focuses on finding common ground between regional rivals and conflicting parties through expert and political leader dialogue and policy development, as well as provides consultancy and advice on regional dynamics to a wide range of stakeholders. We also have the Cyprus Institute, which is a world-class nonprofit research and educational institution with a strong scientific and technological orientation. Research conducted by the Cyprus Institute has provided significant insights on climate change impacts on agriculture, public health, ecosystem development, tourism, water resources, and on humanitarian and security issues, including induced mass migration of environmental refugees. In May 2018, the Cyprus Institute organized an international conference on climate change in the Mediterranean and the Middle East that took place in Cyprus under the auspices of the President of the Republic of Cyprus, which drew international attention by eminent scientists and policymakers and emphasized the regional concerted action is urgently needed. Please allow me to introduce our two distinguished speakers, Professor Kostas Papanikolas, advisor to the President of the Republic of Cyprus and the Special Envoy for Climate Change, and Mr. Kawa Hassan, Director of the Stimson Center. Professor Papanikolas, if I may start with you. As the advisor of the President of Cyprus on the Eastern Mediterranean Climate Initiative, which calls for coordinated policy actions, how do you evaluate the prospects of sharing the Green-Blue Deal as a good practice with other Eastern Mediterranean nations? Professor?
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. It's an honor to share this forum with you and share our views, hopes, and try to push the existential, I would say, challenge to the region to where it belongs. First of all, let me congratulate EcoPeace. It's a most wonderful thing that is happening in our region. We are very proud at the Cyprus Institute to have a collaboration with you, an increasing collaboration, as we share the same vision and the same challenges, and it's a common fight. Congratulations for your visionary work and tangible results, and certainly the Green-Blue Deal is one such example. Let me step back. I don't call it climate change. It's a terminology that belongs to the last century. We should be talking about a climate crisis. It's not a change. It doesn't convey the meaning. It's a crisis. Our work here for 20 years now, and as you graciously noted, we are focusing on doing also very rigorous science. That's where most our effort is, to bring details and provide well-vetted solutions, technical and scientific, to address the problem. Every day gets more scary. Our region, I believe we were among the first to call already 8 years ago the Middle East a climate hotspot. It's now accepted by everybody. It's even incorporated in IPCC, and it's twice a hotspot. Because climate crisis is manifesting itself for climatological reasons earlier than it will manifest itself in other parts of the world. It's a very complex climatology underlying that. So already we're on the average above 1.5 degrees, while in Glasgow we were debating how to avoid. We are beyond it in the region. Second is the mass and the underlying complexity. Mass. We are about 450 million people, in size comparable to the European Union. It's emitting about the same greenhouse gases as the European Union. The difference with an upward trend, while the European Union about the same mass in these indices, declining emissions. Big difference. The impact here will be manifest early, in more fierce way. Probably we are already in tipping points, meaning irreversible changes, in a region that is not exactly Benelux. We don't have a history here of solving problems together. We, in our region, unfortunately, and there is a history of, this is the 2,000, 3,000 years ago, of managing to solve problems not by cooperation. There is bad history behind it. And the analogy that Gideon has promoted, wonderful analogy of the coal and steel analogy with the formation of what happened to, at the end, become the EU, it's good, but not good enough. Why? Because after the war, Europe realized that, yeah, this is not the way to solve problems. But there was not a pending explosion. They had time. Here, we don't have time. So we have to solve this problem while the house is on fire. Big difference. The coal and steel could have And actually, frankly, it moves slowly. It's ridiculous that EU still have all these problems after 70 years since this conception. We cannot wait 70 years. Here, we have to really address it in a very, very pressing time schedule. Frankly, I'm panicked. Not because I am a panicky person, it's because I see figures and I see projections, and they don't look good. Let me tell you another fact that is emerging. Actually, some work done here, but not only here. There was an article in Washington Post about 2 weeks ago, number 3, showing that even the data that we're basing our projections are optimistic. The data are far worse than it is reported. Many nations understate the problem or overstate the prospects of curing the problem. So we need imaginative solutions in a crisis where time is in supply. Otherwise, it would be no problem. And your proposal is great. Why it's great? It has a lot of challenges to do. It's great because in my other hat, not as a scientist, but rather as an envoy helping the president promote this regional, some say quixotic plan to get the regions of the country to put the fire out together, and then we can sort the rest. Most leaders we talk to say, what is it in for me? Why can't I do this alone? Why do I need to talk to these people who I don't like them anyway? I don't say that. Why can't I do it? So here is an example, and this is a great thing. It's an example, an imaginative example that we need to find more green blue deals where it's convincing, is concrete, that if we work together, nor my house nor yours will be burned as much. We'll minimize the damage. And then by doing that, as was pointed already, we'll find more and more ways to collaborate if somehow we get the ball rolling. Probably I talked too much, but I couldn't congratulate you more because of this aspect.
That was great, Professor Papanikolas. And you said that we are facing a crisis and we no longer have the luxury except to find more green blue deals. I would like to hear a bit more from you on the challenges and opportunities that you see associated with having varying degrees in developments amongst the different nations in the Eastern Mediterranean, and the applicability of initiative similar to the Green Blue Deal. If I can hear more on that from you, Professor Papanikolas.
It's not really a challenge. I don't think that the various degrees of development is a challenge here. Actually, it may be an advantage if it's used creatively. As economists could argue, often trade between different countries of different development offers opportunity. You have, as a result of this, varying degrees of labor cost. Some of the technologies that need to be developed are labor intensive, and therefore it will help unemployment in the poorer countries of the region by providing higher wages in labor intensive aspects. There are developed countries champions in innovation by putting huge resources, either land or competitive prices in labor or abundant natural resources. Abundant natural resources, yes, you said already. Who else has better solar potential than our area. Edison already in the 1800s said there is going to be a shortage of energy. And the long-term solution, in 1880, I believe, said the solution is solar energy. Well, we're still digging for gas. It's there. The Green Blue Deal makes note of it. It's exactly right. Developing it not only through photovoltaics, through solar thermal, process heat, which Europe cannot do. Process heat, where you use thermal energy directly from the cells for industrialization, for producing, generating a new industry, basically. It's a unique challenge to the area. Not many areas can do it. So the complementary aspects of unequal development will raise the level of development of the poorer countries while enabling the richer and more innovative economies to complete in an integrated, expanded market, which is fragmented right now. So fragmentation doesn't help anybody, even without the crisis, on sheer economic terms.
Thank you very much, Professor Kostas Papanikolas. If you allow me now to ask you, Mr. Kawa Hassan, we all know that you co-authored a research report on Iraq, which aims to provide climate-related security risk assessments and recommended management strategies relevant for Iraq. Our Green Blue Deal for the Middle East focuses on the Jordan River Basin. How do you view its applicability to the Euphrates-Tigris Basin? Mr. Kawa.
Thank you very much, Gianna, and good evening to you. And also, thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm really honored to participate again in your annual conference. I remember that almost 3 years ago in Jordan. Also, I was invited to also present some of the key findings of that report. Let me also first also say thank you to Nada, to Gidon and other colleagues, and also join Professor Papanikolas in congratulating you with your great work. And also, an honor to be in this panel with Professor Papanikolas. So we at Stimson are really proud to be a partner with you, Jana, at EcoPeace Middle East to explore the expansion of Green Blue Deal for Tigris-Euphrates Basin. That's Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria, potentially also Lebanon. And so, talking about Iraq and the report which I co-authored a few years ago, first of all, let me say that I was in Iraq a few weeks ago, and I'm really happy to say that there was a lot of interest in the idea of the Green Blue Deal for Tigris-Euphrates Basin. So, and also, there's a lot of excitement about the idea, and also the readiness and willingness from the side of Iraqis, but also regional actors, to to be part of this deal. So that's a very good start. Going back to the report and the potential of GBD, Green Blue Deal for Tigris-Euphrates Basin, let me first of all, going back to what Professor Papanikolas said, and also about the urgency of acting now, that we don't have really the luxury of waiting for 70 or 80 years, particularly, Tigris-Euphrates Basin, Iraq and its neighbors, they don't have that luxury, because the future could be very, very grim. And I will get back to that in a minute. So as we all know, the IPCC has identified Middle East, and including the Tigris-Euphrates Basin, as a climate hotspot. While the rest of the world is seeking to avoid a 1.5 degrees centigrade increase in temperature, the Middle East, including Tigris-Euphrates Basin, actually is forecast to see 4 degrees increase. And as a result, large parts of the region will become unlivable for the long summer period. Just to put this in, in perspective, very recently, less than a week ago, the Iraqi Ministry of Water Resources said that Tigris and Euphrates will run dry by 2040. 2040. If we stay at the current rate of water decline, 2040 is 90 years from now, but that is not a distant future. It's actually, so at the current rate of water decrease, water decline, and decreased water flows from Iran and Turkey, and the mismanagement and corruption in Iraq, by 2040, these two great rivers, which has shaped and created the identity of Iraq and and the historic Iraqi state, they will run dry. So you can just imagine the impact on Iraq and its wider neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, but also its wider neighborhood. Going back to the report which I co-authored, so in that report 3 years ago, we said, back then we really warned against the the security impacts of climate change on Iraq and its neighborhood. So as a result of climate-induced drought, dams built by Turkey and Iran, which has reduced the flows to Iraq, but also I also mentioned the internal problem of mismanagement, corruption, and decades of conflict. 7 million Iraqis have already been impacted and somehow displaced. And there will be more millions to come in the coming years if not, urgent action is not taken by Iraq and its neighborhood. So due to climate change and dams built by neighbors, Iran and Turkey, the water flow to Iraq is really decreasing. And the threat caused by climate change in the basin, Tigris-Euphrates basin, range from water, food and energy insecurity to civil unrest, migration, and full-scale civil uprisings, all further contributing to the possibility of more failed states in the basin. We already have, more than one failed state and failing states. So the result of climate-related security risks on Iraq and its neighborhood will be, by definition, in the coming years, if not really urgent actions is taken, we will see more failed and failing states, and this in a region which is already, dealing with multiple conflicts. So, on top of current mass displacement and conflicts, millions of people in Iraq and Syria will become climate refugees. And the climate refugees will not stay only in Iraq and Syria. We know the challenges Iraq is facing in terms of internal stability, in terms of addressing the issue of corruption of the ruling elite, and we all know the problems of in Syria and the impact of the war on Syria. So these climate refugees, millions of climate refugees, will not only further destabilize Iraq and Syria, but they will also impact national security of both Iran and Turkey and the wider region. And without urgent regional cooperation, and I will conclude for this question, dear Yana, without urgent regional cooperation between Iraq and its neighborhood, and with support of the international community, Tigris and Euphrates basin will face an apocalyptic future in the coming 2 decades. Iraq right now has a population of close to 40 million. By 2050, the population will be 80 million. And by 2040, I cited, the report or the announcement by the Ministry of Water Resources in Iraq. At the current decrease of water flows, by 2040, Tigris and Euphrates will run dry. So this will give you an idea about the apocalyptic future, that is facing Iraq and its neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Kawa. I mean, this is really great. If I can hear briefly from you that while primarily the Green-Blue Deal addresses climate change, but it's also designed to create conflict prevention mechanisms through healthy interdependencies. What would that be like in the context of Iraq and its neighboring countries? Please.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. So now we have analyzed the problem. So, I mean, climate change and the problem it creates, yes, it's, conflict multiplier, but it also could be, an opportunity for cooperation between countries and regions. And yes, the current outlook in the region is really not that positive politically and economically. But at the same time, from our work in Iraq and the rest of the region, we do see really increasing recognition of the need for regional cooperation to address jointly the problem, of climate change and its impact on the regional security. So some of the ideas which which would be interesting and needed really to explore within the Green-Blue Deal for Tigris and Euphrates Basin, and which there is a lot of interest in it in Iraq and the neighborhood, is that where the cooperation between scientists from Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and other countries, where probably Iraq could be a center for regional cooperation. The idea of, for instance, having a center on climate change being based in Iraq. We are, looking into this idea. There's interest in that idea where we can bring scientists together to jointly do research on regional, bilateral and regional impact of climate change, and also jointly produce data. Because one of the problems right now is lack of having credible data. Yes, data is available and data is available to governments and certain agencies, but between scientists, there is really a lack of, having, access to data, which would then enhance their work also towards the government. So one idea is within a Green-Blue Deal, project is, we can look into this having this regional center on climate change, bringing scientists together, but also practitioners and activists. And another idea would be to explore pilot projects, cross-border pilot projects between Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, but also other countries, and show the positive impact of cross-border cooperation on creating green jobs and leading the transition to a green economy. And also the cooperation between civil society organizations, which I think also in the first panel, Chris alluded to that, which is important, but also the other speaker alluded to that. I think there is a growing interest, but also willingness from civil society in Iraq and its neighborhood to join forces and together initiate ideas which then should be taken to governments, and in order to generate political will, because what is lacking at this stage is lack of sufficient political will to jointly as governments address the impact of climate change. And going back to the issue of the water scarcity, as far as Iraq is concerned, there are some talks between Iraq and Turkey, and things, there are some movements, but not as of yet, not really agreements on an equitable water sharing system, which would do justice to both countries. But at least there are discussions, there are talks, and even there are also talks of establishing a center on water management in Iraq, where Turkey and Iraq could join, could cooperate. But unfortunately, that is not the case when it comes to Iraq and Iran. There is really a need for more work for civil society organizations, but also scientists to jointly produce credible studies, and using these studies to generate political will to address the regional impact of climate change.
Thank you very much, Kawa. Thank you very much, Professor Kostas Papanikolas. I very much appreciate you joining us today, and we're very grateful at EcoPeace for your support. But we are also in gratitude and very much your partnership. We will continue to work together for a better future for our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with this, I would like to give the floor to Gidon Bromberg, Israeli Director of EcoPeace Middle East. Gidon?
Thank you, Yana. If I can be allowed to start the video. Yes. Okay, so thank you again very much, Yana, and Nada before that. I'm really delighted to moderate this next panel, which will be the last half hour of our conference today. It's going to discuss the possible linkages between climate resilience and advancing Middle East peace efforts with three highly distinguished diplomats. We're truly honored to have with us Her Excellency Tanya Mishkova, the ambassador in charge of water diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, with Slovenia presently holding the EU presidency. We're honored to have His Excellency Hadi Amr, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israel and the Palestinian Affairs at the US State Department's Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. And we're delighted to have His Excellency Ambassador Andrei Baklanov, Professor, Head of the Middle East Section of the National Research University, the Higher School of Economics, and President of the Association of Russian Diplomats from the Russian Federation. I'm not going to have time to read out the very distinguished bios of our high-level speakers, but we ask that you do read them in the agenda that was sent to you. I'm very much aware of the generous time that all three speakers have given us, but Hadi Amr in particular needs to move on to another meeting. So I will turn, Hadi, first of all, to you with two questions. The new Israeli coalition government, Hadi, is very vocal, as you know, about its desire to work with the Biden administration on climate issues. Do you see opportunities to advance the Israeli-Palestinian peace process through a climate lens, such as the Green-Blue Deal, as suggested by EcoPeace? And as Nada had mentioned in her introduction, Israeli-Palestinian water issues are a final status issue, that their failure to resolve leaves Palestinians with intermittent water supplies and Israeli and Palestinians cross-border streams heavily polluted. Given the Biden administration's commitment to improving lives and livelihoods on the ground, especially for Palestinians, under what conditions might the Biden administration be willing to champion the issue of resolving water issues first? Hadi, the floor is yours. Please demute.
Can you hear me now?
Terrific.
Gidon, thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you and Nada and so many friends who've been doing just so much tremendous positive work, not only over years, but really over decades. And really, I am personally, and the United States is truly grateful for so much of the work that you have done, that Nada has done, that your whole team has done. And, you know, we see some of those fruits, some of that work bearing fruit today in terms of the UAE, Jordan, Israel deal that we hope will ultimately benefit others, including the Palestinians. Gidon, you've asked a really good question, and I don't know if I can answer it head on, but what I'd say initially, right, is, you know, the Biden administration has made clear that we are working to advance the freedom, security, and prosperity for all peoples in the Middle East. That includes Israelis and Palestinians, of course. And when you talk about freedom, security, and prosperity, those things, you know, do speak to fundamental, you know, they're kind of core issues, but they also have a dimension in climate and environment. And so for that reason, we certainly hope to address climate climate issues, including a whole range of climate issues, whether it's desalination using renewable energy to mitigate crises in the short term, decarbonization, and returning water to climate systems. We want to do all of that. Climate and energy are also, we understand them as transnational issues, right? So it's beyond just Israelis and Palestinians. It's regional, and so and it's also very important. And another point I wanted to make is that the way we see it, the Palestinian people are in dire need of considerably more water, considerably more energy to lead healthy and productive lives. And so, Israel has made laudable commitments on progress to a greener environment. But given how closely these two economies and regulatory systems are intertwined, Israel's success on climate is kind of incomplete without Palestinian progress and success on climate. And so that's something we also want to advance. Yes, in the 1990s, water was identified as a final status issue, due to the indivisibility of the shared aquifer that Israelis and Palestinians both wanted to access. Back then, the U.S. helped create the MEDRIC, the Middle East Desalination and Research Center in Muscat, where the parties have, explored solutions to freshwater scarcity. We've just recently made another contribution to MEDRIC, and we hope that the parties engage on that. Anyway, Gidon, I know this has just kind of been a broad overview, but I thought I would offer those, comments, and if there's anything further, I'm happy to carry on the conversation later on.
So thank you, Hadi. If I could just hone, because I know that you're tight on time, if I can hone just on the water approach. Do you think that there is room to move forward, perhaps on a water-first approach? And what do you see as the obstacles that might prevent that from moving forward?
I understand the question. I was trying to. I understand the question. Look, I think that given the broad range of needs, we're trying to address a broad range of issues, right? So I think what you mean by water first is, trying to come to a final status agreement on water on its own without addressing other issues. And I think that I guess what I would say on that is we are trying to address a range of issues in a practical way on the ground, whether it's security, whether it's economy, whether it's these important climate issues which touch on both security and economy. So while I can't commit to a water first approach for a final status agreement, what I can commit to is that the United States, as you've seen from the involvement of Secretary Kerry, is taking climate very seriously in theory. And with the agreement, the UAE, Israel, Jordan agreement that was just signed, we're taking climate very seriously in practice. And we are certainly willing to engage in serious discussions on how to advance water and climate arrangements between the Israelis and Palestinians in the near term. But I can't go quite as far as I think you'd like me to go in making that specific commitment. But again, what I am committing to is that we're taking it very seriously, number one. Number two, we're trying to put the theory into practice. And your work, Gidon and Nada and everyone with your organization has helped us put that theory into practice. And so what we can commit to is looking to work for ways to multiply those practical efforts so that even if we're not putting climate first in terms of a final status agreement, we're certainly taking climate extremely seriously alongside other efforts to improve the situation, which in this case not only benefit the immediate countries in the region, but the world, because we all benefit when the climate benefits.
Thank you very, very much, Hadi. That couldn't have been more clear, and that I think that was extremely helpful to many in the audience that are listening to understand where the clear priorities are of the Biden administration in helping bring peace and prosperity to our troubled region. And I want to express our gratitude for the many years of cooperation that we've had together, and we look forward to continue in the cooperation with the Biden administration. If I can turn next then to Tanya, and if I may ask you, Tanya, what do you see from a European perspective as the opportunities and challenges to help advance the Israeli-Palestinian peace process through a climate lens? Do you see possible political interest in aligning EU foreign policy on the Green-Blue deal with the Green-Blue deal as suggested by EcoPeace? So Tanya, if I can next turn to you.
Yes, thank you, Gidon. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. European Green Deal and its components have a very strong international dimension that commits the EU to lead international negotiations and action on climate and energy, biodiversity, to use its green diplomacy, multilateral engagements, trade policy, external investments, and international cooperation to shape and support the global sustainability transition. And the EU has committed to use the European Green Deal as its compass for the post-COVID recovery and to help partner countries to build back better. In recognizing the link between climate change and security, it also started developing tools for climate risk assessment, early warning, response, resilience. It has ramped up its climate, energy, and water diplomacy. So it has been working on linking climate development and peace and security action. And I think a good example of this is a very recently adopted Council conclusions on water in EU external action that Slovenia was behind. And they're based on three pillars: humanitarian, development, and peace, while reflecting the cross-cutting nature of water, so its relevance for health, humanitarian, human development, ecosystem, climate action, and the emphasis is on comprehensive preventive action. So I've been, following the Middle East and Middle East peace process for large part of my career, and seen many windows of opportunity that came and went by, and you can manage a conflict for decades, but climate action does not give us this privilege. It cannot wait. It cannot wait for the right political moment to appear, or the trust to be built, or the right constellations to form. And I think we can all come to the conclusion that this is an existential problem that needs to be addressed now and not in 10 or 20 years. So I firmly believe, also from the experience from my region, that water and climate change, or climate crisis, rather represent a perfect entry point, or as your Green-Blue deal says, multiplier of opportunities for establishing cooperation, especially in conditions where very little or no trust exists among the parties, and you can start with innocent technical challenge or initiatives like the previous speaker mentioned, Joint Research Center on Climate, or in case of former Yugoslavia, it was navigation purposes on a river, and you start from there, and then you you develop, let's say, a joint situation assessment, and then you go to a joint solution, which is supported by international community. So basically, the Green-Blue deal ticks of all the boxes here. So you have this joint study that proposes joint solution. You need the support of the international community. You're trying to match the grassroots movements with top-down political will and secure international support. And you have the very important technological innovation element that can change the political economy sometimes, and also geostrategical balance like desalination. And you have the engagement of the local communities, because I mean, this is crucial. They have to reward the results and give the legitimacy to the project. And changing narratives that prevent trust to be established across borders, this is crucial. And this is where the awareness raising educational element comes in. So the Green-Blue deal in its 4 pillars includes all these necessary elements. And it's an excellent template for building trust and creative, positive codependencies. And it's fascinating how it connects the water, food, energy ecosystem nexus, as well as water, peace, and security nexus. So are there synergies between the Green-Blue deal and European Green Deal? Absolutely. If you look at the specifics of the European Green Deal and all the action documents and strategies that have been adopted since, they propose the same principles, approaches, the same actions, interlinkages, like support to transboundary water cooperation and regional integration has been the mainstay of EU water diplomacy and reiterated again in the Water Council conclusions. And we have the financial instruments, the new financial instruments, especially Team Europe approach, where Europe is promoting both bilateral and regional projects and investments, including on water and energy and environment and climate change. And those include also Team Europe approach initiatives for Jordan on sustainable water management. There's a project on Palestine sustainable growth. And there's a regional southern neighborhood initiative on jobs through trade and investment. So there is a possibility to link these instruments that the Green-Blue deal offer, that the EU Green Deal offers, and including the finances, and of course, where you need to work, where we all need to work on is to find the political support for this for the Green-Blue deal. And this is something that requires a lot of engagement, especially with the major EU member states, the EU delegations on the ground. But I think it's something that needs to be done because, as I said, no one can survive without water, and this is something that needs to be addressed now and not wait for the right stars to align in 10 or 20 years.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Very clear that we're drawing the lessons not only from the coal and steel arrangements of the middle of last century, but also of the experience of Slovenia and the Balkans, and how the Balkans have come together also on water issues, less water scarcity, but as you said, on navigating the rivers that are the lifeblood of your region. We look forward to closely work with Europe, with the European Union, with the next presidency, France, to advance the dialogue and the discussion that we've very much enjoyed holding with you and the Slovenian presidency in these last 6 months. Let me turn to, because I am concerned of time, we are a little bit over time. Let me turn next to our third and very prestigious speaker, Professor Baklanov. Professor Baklanov has noted the Israeli-Palestinian water issues are a final status issue, that their failure to resolve leaves Palestinians with intermittent water supplies and Israelis and Palestinians with cross-border streams that are heavily polluted? Is there Russian diplomatic interest in helping to resolve water issues in the region? And how and under what conditions might the Russian Federation be willing to champion water issues here in the Middle East? Professor Baklanov, please.
Thank you, Gidon. Well, the voice is going okay, yes? You can hear me? Yeah?
Excellent.
Okay, fine. First of all, I'd like to convey congratulations and best wishes on the occasion of the annual EcoPeace conference from colleagues from Moscow, Russian Ecological Society, the Association of Russian Diplomats, and the Higher School of Economics, which became exactly this month the biggest university in Russia, surpassing by size even Moscow State University. In Moscow in October this year, we had the pleasure of hearing wonderful speeches made by EcoPeace directors. We believe that Gidon, together with Nada and Yana, are doing wonderful work of great importance, which could be defined no less than historical, because many people talk about the need to start productive cooperation of the peoples living in the Middle East, while EcoPeace actually shows that such cooperation is possible in principle and can be effective. Therefore, my first thesis is that we in Moscow are supporting your mission and willing to cooperate. We have just celebrated 30 years of on the start of Madrid peace conference peace process, and we believe today that we need to continue fulfilling the task formulated in Madrid. We see EcoPeace as a practical and realistic continuation of the Madrid process under new conditions. We are ready to do what we can do and what the situation allows us to do to bridge our efforts on the ground on what was formulated in the Green-Blue Deal for the Middle East. You formulated the 4 key areas of action, and I quote what was in the document which you produced: promoting public awareness and education programs, particularly directed towards youth, on resilient diplomacy in the water and climate fields as a means of conflict resolution and peace building. Well, actually, this is a very good aim, and we are ready to go on collaborating with you in fulfilling of this aim. Well, Russia is ready to consider 3 specific venues in this regard. First, taking into account the existence of good, trusted relations of Russia with Arab countries, Palestine, Jordan, and at the same time with Israel, we could step in, if necessary, to assist in the search of mutual compromises in resolving water contradictions in the region, if necessary, of course. We are not trying to impose ourselves or to compete for influence in a way it was characteristic for the Soviet era. No. After thorough study, we could also think on the probability of participation of our technical specialists in the environmental and water projects. Also, we are ready. But in this respect, of course, we could only organize the primary context, and the business must do what it should do, not politicians, not diplomatic stuff. So we can build an opportunity for them to go on as the technical side of the story is concerned. Second, we could continue to work on the re-establishment of a multilateral working group on water resources, or maybe water resources and ecology. Actually, today the speakers were characterizing the multilateral track as potentially most efficient in the region. It's rather difficult to deal with the water crisis on the level of national efforts. It's necessary to combine our efforts. We are ready to cooperate. Let me remind that such a group originally was created at a meeting of the ministers of foreign affairs of the United States and Russia and high-level representatives of the countries of the Middle East region in January 1992. It was in Moscow, so we are also approaching this date of 30 years anniversary of establishment of such groups. The idea of reactivating such a group was supported by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, at a meeting of Valdai Forum in March this year. The minister cited my article containing this proposal, thus proving that track 1 personalities, they read and they sometimes use track 2 activities proposals. The special representative of the President of Russia, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russian Federation, Mr. Bogdanov, also in October greeted these proposals, and I was reading his message during a meeting which we had together with EcoPeace co-chairs in the international forum which we organized in Moscow. And finally, the third point, we are ready to provide political support for EcoPeace on various international platforms on both environmental and political profile. Well, and today there was a question whether it is possible to single out water problems from the final status agreements. It's easier for me to deal with this problem or even to manipulate with the deal of the final status because I was among those diplomats who participated in the first meeting when it was in Taba in May 1996. It was the first meeting of the final status collaboration. Unfortunately, this first meeting turned to be the last one because there were elections in Israel, and the new Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, he succeeded in making political climate change in political climate crisis as far as the final status is concerned. But we are ready to return back, and we are ready to help making this idea real. I mean, making the water resources problems of special attention. And today in the morning we were preparing the next year schedule for our big rallies, and I will tell you that in Moscow there is a tendency to give much more importance to the environmental problems and water problems next year, including the next session of St. Petersburg Economic Forum. I think that we already participated in this year in different meetings, and I think that we can prolong even much more successfully in much more wide range next year. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to speak to you, to listen to your remarks, and I take a note on many interesting ideas which you said today, and I will convey these ideas to my colleagues in the ministry and in track 2. Our experts I'm very much thankful, and I'm ready to go on collaborating with you. It's a big deal for us. It's very important, and we wish you new successes in the year to come. Thank you.
Professor Baklanov, thank you very, very much for that important presentation with some very clear recommendations of how to move forward. I think that what we're seeing from this panel is an alignment, not only an alignment of an understanding of the climate crisis and the urgency to act, but some very clear messages out of Washington, out of Brussels, and out of Moscow, that there is room to work together. And certainly at EcoPeace, the type of cooperation that we want to see between Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians is equally needed with the support of leaders and governments such as yourselves. So grateful. Please join me in thanking Professor Ambassador Baklanov, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Hadi Amr, and Ambassador Tanya Mishkova. I think that our time, unfortunately, has come to an end. We're a little bit over time. I think we heard today from 3 panels representing different perspectives on climate and peace building. The first panel led by conflict resolution experts. The second panel by think tanks and academia. And this last panel by highly seasoned diplomats. Each panel, I hope, were able to bring forth the message of alignment, that we are indeed able to work together and build on the expertise at the scientific level, at the conflict resolution level, at the think tank policy level, and at the level of creating political will. At EcoPeace, we're extremely grateful to all the distinguished speakers for their participation and for sharing with us your wisdom. We thank all of our staff at EcoPeace in our 3 offices, and in particular for their support in organizing this event, the back office team of Max, of Amy, of Lubna, Shelby, and Mohammed. We're very grateful to all of our many supporters, individuals, foundations, and governments, and in particular, Sweden, for well over a decade of support to EcoPeace and our environmental peace-building efforts. Finally, we want to thank you, the audience. We hope that our annual conference next year will be in person in the region, where we can see each other and touch each other face to face, which we so much miss. In the meantime, on behalf of our board, our distinguished International Advisory Committee, and the staff from all of our 3 offices, we wish all a happy and healthy holiday season and all the best for the new year of 2022 ahead. Please do continue to follow us on social media channels and by subscribing to our monthly newsletter through our website. Let me say shukran, toda rabah, and thank you. Wishing you a good day, a good afternoon, and a good evening from wherever you might be. Thank you.